All right, welcome to the Patriot Nation podcast. We are doing an instant reaction show. The Patriots have finally, at 7:25, 3 hours after it was due, finally released their 53-man roster. Some surprises in there, some not. But that's your boy Pat Lane, as always, here with Matt St. Jean. Matt, what are your first takeaways here?
That it's the typical kind of opening day 53-man roster where there's some positions where you look at it and go, wow, can't believe they kept that many guys, or I can't believe they didn't keep that many guys. But the guys that are cut are all guys where it's like, all right, they'll probably end up on the practice squad, or they might end up making a 53-man somewhere else. But
Right.
I think the best player that they cut is probably, it's either
Trey
Justin
Nixon.
Bethel. Well, it goes without saying. But it's Henry Anderson or Justin Bethel. And Bethel is a guy who's a special teamer, and Henry Anderson got put on IR, and he's been fine against second string guys, and that's it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and Henry Anderson, and I think Field Yates was the one that tweeted it out that Anderson and Wilkerson were cut, and then, of course, then he changed that to now they've both been put on IR. So, again, anyone put on IR today or before 4 o'clock today means that they go to season-ending IR. So, Christian Wilkerson, Henry Anderson, their seasons are done, right?
And they throw in Jawan Williams and
Perkins, right? Yep. So their seasons are over. You will not see any of them this year at all. So those guys are done. Now, of course, we do know there are things coming. Now, it's surprising. I think the first thing people want to talk about, I assume, would be the wide receivers, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of looked at it. We thought little Jordan Humphrey would make the roster. He did not. He gets cut along with Trey Nixon. And now you're looking at, okay, you got 5 wide receivers, but you don't really have 5 wide receivers because Tyquan Thornton's going to be out. We don't know how many weeks, but multiple weeks for sure. They said maybe up to 10. That was like 3 weeks ago. So, he could miss the first 7 to 8 games of the season, depending on, how fast he recovers from his injury. So now the question becomes, you assume he goes onto IR. I would imagine the plan would be to bring one of those wide receivers back or potentially trade or sign another wide receiver that someone has cut or someone doesn't like, right? So they didn't trade for anyone before the 4 o'clock deadline, meaning that anyone that wasn't going to be on a roster isn't on a roster. Maybe someone was holding on to someone saying, hey, we'll trade this guy to you eventually, but we can't work things out before 4 o'clock. We'll figure it out. We don't mind keeping him on the roster because he's a decent enough player, and we think we can get someone back. So they can't go into the season with 4 healthy wide receivers. It's just not going to happen. So something's got to give here.
See, I disagree with you there. I think they absolutely can go in with 4 healthy wide receivers because we know this team this year, they want to play with 2 tight ends on the field, which means that most of the time it's going to be 2 receivers out there, maybe 3. They're not going to do a whole lot of 4 receiver sets because when they like to spread the field, they like to have a tight end and a running back out there. Then they can go no huddle and they can give you a variety of looks. So if that's what you're doing, you have 4 healthy receivers and you think Tyquan Thornton's back in October. All right, well, we're going to go 5-6 weeks of the season with 4 guys. You should be able to do everything. Obviously, not a lot of injury insurance, but if you have a guy on the practice squad, if Trey Nixon ends up back there, he could be in this. And they brought in, like we mentioned this, they brought in Daz Newsome for a workout. I think they're looking at outside options. My guess is we're going to end up with 2 or 3 wide receivers on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And if somebody gets hurt, that guy's going to get elevated probably just as like a game day elevation for a couple weeks. Like they did with Isaiah Zuber a couple years ago.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I think the other thing too, and you mentioned the 2 tight ends, Matt Sokol got cut, right? Devin Asiasi got cut, but he's not coming back. I think there's a very good chance that Matt Sokol ends up back on the 53-man roster when things are done, right?
Or because Weidermeyer is another guy who I think they might keep around on the practice squad.
Yep.
I think both of those. I hate to say this. I think the guy that's coming back when Thornton goes to injured reserve is going to be James Ferentz on the offensive line.
God.
And I can't believe he's sticking around for another year, but they clearly like him. I don't know. I mean, preseason games are the tip of the iceberg. So whatever he's doing behind closed doors, they must absolutely love.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't see it. Same thing with Jelani Tavai. He's another one in the linebacking group. We'll talk about eventually, but that one drives me crazy. So Dark Blue Gold here is asking about Pierre Strong. Are we surprised that Pierre Strong made the 53-man roster? It's a good question. I'm not. I'm not surprised he made the roster. The only way I thought he wouldn't make the roster was if he went to IR, which isn't going to happen right now. Kevin Harris didn't make the roster. JJ Taylor didn't make the roster, but we assume now maybe the Ty Montgomery injury. Obviously, Ty Montgomery injury wasn't as bad as we thought. I thought he broke his ankle.
Yeah.
Clearly didn't, right? But you got to assume maybe it's a high ankle sprain. That's maybe 5-6 weeks. Probably put him on IR. He can come back after 4. Now you got to bring a running back off the practice squad. You would assume it would either be Harris or Taylor, depending on what they decide to do. So that's kind of what I would assume happens. Again, you're gonna kind of make that assumption that Ty Montgomery and Tyquan Thornton's going to end up on the IR for sure. Maybe Ty Montgomery probably will too. They haven't said anything about what his injury looks like, so we'll see.
Yeah, and Ty Montgomery is another guy that plays into the wide receiver picture. He can go out and run routes. He can do that. And you put it all together, him, the 2 tight ends, and the 4 receivers, that's 7 guys that can run routes.
Right.
You're asking 4 or 5 guys to do it every play. That's enough to get it done. If you got the insurance on the practice squad, then this is completely fine for your 53-man roster.
Right. That's a good point. And not only that, but Ramondre Stevenson showed quite an ability to run routes as well and catch the ball even down the seam and down the middle of the field. So I think that's kind of something too that they can look at where they're kind of happy with that. Now they did keep 8 offensive linemen. We knew it would be somewhere around 8 or 9, right? They keep the starting 5. They kept Yodny Kajust. They kept Justin Herron. They kept Chasen Hines, rookie Chasen Hines. So the Hines one was a little interesting to me. I didn't see him pop that much. I thought Cody Russi looked better, but Russi's a guy who has, and Hines doesn't really have position flexibility either. He doesn't play center. He's just a guard. But, if Ferentz is going to be on the practice squad, then you kind of say, hey, hopefully we can get Russi on the practice squad. But if something doesn't happen, then we always have James Ferentz we can back up. He's the backup center and then necessarily the guard. So,
James Ferentz is that friend you have around who, if you need a date to the dance at the last minute, they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like there's no backup center on this team right now. So he's one of Russi or Ferentz is going to be involved in this team somehow this season. We just don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I went back, I rewatched the Raiders game to kind of watch the offensive line and see what was going on. Their top 2 guards off the bench were Arlington Hambright and Will Sherman.
Yeah.
And I watched, they looked pretty good to me. Obviously, I'm the untrained eye, but I don't think they looked worse than Hines. I thought they all looked about the same. They all made about the same number of mistakes. So I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't see either of those guys make the roster, especially Sherman with a year under his belt with the team already.
So I agree.
They just don't like what they're getting with Sherman because he didn't make the roster last year either. He was on the practice squad.
Very true, and that's one of those things where he may end up on the practice squad again. I thought Sherman had a good shot to make it. I really thought Hambright had a shot to make it because of his flexibility with guard and tackle. I thought he'd be the perfect candidate, right? Instead, they got 2 tackle. You really have to have 2 tackles with the way that Brown and Wynn are injured all the time. You really have to have 2 tackles. I'm surprised Tehran's on the roster. He's played like garbage in the preseason, but he has his moments. He's been decent. I think he's better on the right side than he is on the left side. Yeah. And so he's okay. He's not great, but he's okay.
And that's kind of where I'm surprised. I'm surprised they didn't keep more interior guys because in a way you can argue they have 5 tackles on this roster because Onwenu can go outside and do that too. I kind of figured they might view him as your real 3rd tackle if somebody goes down during a game and try to have one of these guards come up. Obviously, they did not like the top backup guards. Otherwise, they would still be on the roster. So, again, preseason's the tip of the iceberg. These guys have been working in front of the coaches for a long time now. So, if they're not liking it, Bill's probably getting this decision right about who they're keeping and who they're not.
Yeah, Z-Tax was asking about Sherman taking snaps at center. I don't remember that. It's certainly possible, but I don't remember seeing that at all.
No, Sherman has guard and tackle versatility. That's he and Hambright can both do that. I think Sherman played tackle in college at Colorado.
Yeah. Yep. So, anyways, that's it. And of course, Trey Nixon, like, listen, the hype train is just in the station right now. Okay. Just in the station. It's going to be fine. The biggest issue with Nixon is that he didn't play through contact. Had he played through contact, he'd be on this team. If he catches those deep passes, he had like 3 drops on deep passes where the defender gets into him and he drops it. And that's just play strength. That's just play strength. And that's something that he needs to work on again. I think he played well in the slot when they put him in the slot in the spring. He played well as that deep guy, right? He did a really nice job adjusting those passes, but it's just the ability to fight through the contact that he wasn't able to do, right? And as the conductor of the hype train, I am not off it. It's in the station. Okay, we'll be accepting boarding passes, right? Starting in May of 2023, maybe even in April of 2023. Might start early, but we're still here. But we're just gonna have to wait one more year for him.
And if Nixon's sticking around on that practice squad, we know Parker is a guy with an injury history.
Yep.
And Tyquan Thornton's already injured. There's going to be opportunities for him to get called up at least. So it's not over yet. We've seen flashes from him. I don't think he's a bad player. He's just still putting it together. And
yeah,
we'll see how that looks if he does get a call this year.
Yeah, exactly. And Brian Hoyer, who I kept off of both of my initial 53-man rosters. I just thought I don't care. I just don't care. I'm just like I don't want him on the team. Bailey Zappi's already outplayed him as far as I'm concerned. But the problem is he's due $3 million, and realistically, he's a coach on the field for Mac Jones. That's all he is. He's a coach on the field for Mac Jones. So you're willing to pay the money and you're willing to lose the roster spot because it's that important. He may not dress for regular season games. He might not, because I think you're comfortable with what Bailey Zappi gives you. And of course,
only one of them is dressing, not both.
I agree with you 100% on that one. Yeah. Right. And so, but I feel like, maybe the first 2 or 3 games, like Hoyer dresses, but then after that, I think you've seen enough from Zappi to say, okay, we're screwed if Mac goes down no matter what. But we can survive with this kid at quarterback. He at least is at Hoyer's level right now as a rookie, in my opinion. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see that happen as we go forward. But, Hoyer just, it is what it is. You live with that. You live with that spot because you have to.
He's your insurance policy that they signed in case they couldn't get somebody else and in case the rookie's not able to give you minutes. And the rookie's good enough, but I understand Hoyer saying, hey, I need something in this that's going to keep me around because I don't want to just be stowed away.
Exactly.
No blame to him on that one.
I agree with you there. So let's flip over to the defense D-line. LeBrian Ray gets cut, undrafted rookie free agent that a lot of people were very high on, including me and you as well. But they did keep 2 rookies, Sam Roberts, 6th-round draft pick Sam Roberts, and then rookie defensive lineman DeMarcus Mitchell, which to me was kind of a no-brainer the way he popped and flashed. I thought he really deserved that roster spot, not only from the defensive line, but also from the special teams. I was really impressed with him. And then Carl Davis, little bit of a surprise from Carl Davis, but the thing about Davis is that he gives them something they don't really have with anyone else, which is that big man in the middle, true nose tackle player. They don't have that from anybody else on their team. And so, especially if you're going to run odd man fronts with a guy head up on the center or even in the one technique, it's helpful to have a guy like that, especially on early downs. And so it does make sense when you think about it. And obviously, just the regular guys after that.
Yeah, and I don't think Davis is that good, but he does require 2 people to move him out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's valuable. In the game against the Raiders, I think where we started to see a little bit more of what the defense is going to look like, we got to see more of the starting defense on the field.
Yep. When
the Raiders came out with kind of their heavier, what we've seen from the Patriots, 2 running backs on the field or 2 tight ends on the field, anything like that, the Josh McDaniels stuff, Patriots were in a 3-4 defense with 3 defensive tackles. It was Guy, Barmore, and Godcha all on the field at the same time. If they're going to do more of that, it makes sense to keep this many defensive linemen. It makes sense to keep Carl Davis. I mean, they've got Godcha, Barmore, Guy, Carl Davis, and Sam Roberts, who can all play defensive tackle. Plus, Equale, who is suspended. We'll see what happens with him after the next couple weeks. If you're counting him towards it, I mean, that's 6 defensive tackle bodies that they have control over for the season. Plus Wise and Mitchell, who can give you more of a conventional defensive end.
Exactly. So then the linebacker spot, obviously, the normal ones are there, but the one that was interesting and the one that people will talk about, and the one that I'll talk about is freaking Jelani Tavai over Cam McGrone. I just don't get it. I don't see what Jelani Tavai gives you. Now, I do also understand now that Cam McGrone looked a little bit slow. He looked a little bit late to react on some of those things. I get that. I understand that. I can live with that, right? And I understand he's coming off of an ACL. He's probably going to get to the practice squad. He has some of that upside, but he's not necessarily a guy you want on the active roster right now. That's okay. I understand that. What I don't understand is why Jelani Tavai is on this team. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. Like, I think the role there is clear, like what they're looking for from him. I understand how he makes a 53-man roster across the NFL. I understand why they like him, but I still don't understand why they're keeping him over some of these other options.
Right.
And I have no issues with him over McGrone. I think he's probably played better. And I'm a guy that likes McGrone a lot. I think Tavai's outplayed him this year.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. I mean, me personally, I probably would have kept one extra offensive lineman. Or maybe you keep Kevin Harris. Or you keep an extra corner. I mean, I think there's a lot of other ways you could have gone with it. I mean, that said, Tavai was at one point a highly touted prospect. So maybe there is something there. They're still hoping they're getting something out of him. But I don't know. Patricia must like him too from those days in Detroit.
I would imagine that's true. So Zach again says, he's a great locker room leadership guy, which he probably is, right? And don't get me wrong, like that's of course an important thing. But you have some of those guys, and you're letting young guys walk that have to now clear waivers. And yeah, okay, Cam McGrone probably should clear waivers and make it another practice squad. What if he doesn't? And again, it's not the biggest deal. It's not like they're going to suck because they don't have Cam McGrone anymore. But like, I would like to see Kevin Harris, you mentioned. I would like to see other guys that you're like, hey, this guy has a shot to help out.
LeBron Ray is another guy who I thought
100%
was going to make. And that's that. I mean, these guys we're talking about, is it likely that LeBron Ray is going to end up a starter in this league? Probably not. Cam McGrone, probably not. Kevin Harris, I like him a lot. But even then, I think he's still a role piece. He's a running back by committee type back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these cuts aren't guys who you're not losing all pros here. But I do have kind of questions about the roster construction. But we've also seen Bill do this for 22 years now. And I don't think it's a surprise he's going to keep a smart linebacker with at least decent athleticism who's good against the run.
Right. That's a good point. And then the corner spot, listen, safety, we all knew what was happening, right? All the safeties got kept. All 5 safeties got kept. At corner, Mitchell, we heard, didn't make the team earlier in the day. Then the question was, is Shaun Wade going to make the team or not? He does make the initial 53-man roster. Of course, he's been limited, so the question is he going to be healthy? But I do think that Shaun Wade showed enough in camp. He made a little bit of a leap this year, I think, as opposed to last year. Now, last year in the preseason, he was the number 1 graded cornerback in the preseason last year for the Ravens. So Patriots trade for him, and I think you saw a little bit of that this year. He's got some length. He's got some athleticism. I think he's a good prospect for them to have. Now, is he going to start this year? Probably not. Is he going to play a ton this year? Probably not. But I do like the idea of him there. Now, it is going to be interesting to kind of see what happens, right? So, but again, Miles Bryant sticks around. People had questions about Miles Bryant. Belichick, I think, put them to bed the last few days. But people had questions about Miles Bryant. Of course, the Jones brothers are there. And then, John Jones and Jalen Mills. I think their corners, if you combine their corners and safeties, I think they have a solid group, right? I really do.
I really like the DB room for this team. It's not flashy. There's not a whole lot of playmakers, and I think they might have issues with that at some point. But it's a really nice combination of talent. You can see how it works on the field. And especially if they're going to go with Jonathan Jones outside, then you have a clear top 2 corners who can good in this league in Mills and Jones. But then it's a whole bunch of other guys who you're hoping, all right, they're going to get a turn at some point during the season. They're going to get to play in the slot. They might get a game or 2 outside, depending on game plan. Jack Jones, Shaun Wade, whoever's on top of that battle for kind of the last outside corner there. and they're going to get looks. And I mean, Jack Jones is a high risk guy. He likes to take chances on the ball. He can give you opportunities, and they're missing that. I mean, no J.C. Jackson this year. They need a guy in the secondary who can create those plays. I like the upside Jack Jones gives you there. I like Marcus Jones. Obviously, the safety room is fantastic.
Loaded.
It has to be the best safety room in the NFL.
Top to bottom, 100%. I mean, they don't have the best safety in the league, but like they have 5 guys that can all play and all play pretty well, it seems like.
And they're moving them around. I mean, we saw a little bit in the preseason of Kyle Duggar playing single high. They're not going to ask him to do that 20 snaps a game in the regular season, but you can do a lot of different things with your coverages, and you can confuse other teams. The indicator is usually where's the safety. That's what the quarterback's looking for first. And if there's 3 safeties or 4 safeties on the field, you got to watch for, and any of them could drop deep, and any of them could come on a blitz, and any of them could come underneath, and any of them could be in man coverage. Like, it gives you more options. I still worry about the upside. I worry about what they're going to do against the best receiver groups in the league. But against anybody that doesn't have like a true dominant receiver, I think this defensive back group is going to do really well.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, the last position is the specialist. There's no real surprises here, except for the fact that Cody Davis is on it and Justin Bethel is off it. Zach Cox did tweet out his Instagram post, and it sounded a lot like a guy that was leaving New England. That's what it sounded like. Could be a guy even retiring, to be honest with you. But seems like he's not going to be playing for the Patriots this year. Cody Davis, of course, is. And so, we'll kind of see where that goes. Yeah. But we know that Belichick puts a ton into special teams. Guys make the roster because of their willingness to play special teams and their abilities on special teams. But, it is still a little frustrating to see a guy like Cody Davis out there. You're like, I thought we got rid of him with Brandon Schooler,
I don't mind keeping Cody Davis if Justin Bethel is the guy going.
Right.
And I do like that they're getting younger. Right? It's because they still have Slater and you still have Cody Davis, but you're swapping out Justin Bethel for Brendan Schooler. You get a younger guy in there. DeMarcus Mitchell is going to give you something on special teams. I think Pierre Strong is probably going to be able to give you something on special teams.
Right.
I would guess that they're going to ask Bledsoe, some of these linebackers, to give you something there. So that gives opportunities for these guys to make plays. And I'm excited about that. It's a different special teams group, a very different special teams group than the one we had last year. And I think that's a good thing because the one we had last year was not working.
It certainly wasn't. No. And I think the biggest thing, and this is the biggest thing for me, right? And with Asiasi leaving today, right? You start looking at some of the drafts from the past, right? And it's not the Raiders who had some really dreadful drafts, certainly in the first round. But that 2017-2019 stretch for the Patriots was just really bad. Really, really bad. With I think there's 4 guys on the roster still from those 3 years. And that's just something that can't happen, right? In 2020, of course, you have Keene and Asiasi, who were abject failures. Justin Rohrwasser, who was a terrible pick. But then you look at the rest of the 2020 class, and you're like, well, we have some guys that are contributors here, right? We got 4 guys that might be starters from that 2020 class. So it may not be the impact guys that you wanted or expected, but it turns out it's not as bad of a class as it looked like maybe at first blush, when you whiff on Asiasi and Keene. And then last year, of course, you hit on a ton of players. And this year, you're keeping 9? I didn't even go through and count.
I think 10 rookies this year.
Is it 10? 10 rookies.
I think that's what Mike Reese said.
Yeah, 9 or 10. I gotta go through and count it. But either way, you have a ton of rookies from this year's class. And the biggest thing to me, what you've seen from them, and Duggar was kind of the start of this, is the athleticism. And, that to me is what you're looking at. The uptick in athleticism in this year, in this team from last year to this year is incredible. Raekwon McMillan, Mac Wilson, Marcus Jones, Cole Strange, Tyquan Thornton. You start looking at the number, Pierre Strong, Ty Montgomery, those guys, they are bringing in guys that have that elite athleticism. And that's what this league is all about right now, right? And so to have that on your team, I think is huge. They don't have all of the guys, right? They're not the Dolphins who have 4 guys that can run, whatever. But they're getting significantly better in that area. And if they keep hitting on draft picks and undrafted free agents like they've been doing the last few years, this team's going to be really good in a year or two.
Yeah, and I think what I like about this draft and the way it's built on previous ones is that I feel like now they have a lot of solid players. This team is a good team. It should have a solid foundation. It should have depth. The next level, how you take that next step, is to have home run hitters, guys that can make those big plays for you. Because you can have a good team all you want, but if nobody can make a play, all right, the Chiefs are going to drive down the field on you in 12 plays instead of 4. Like you're
Right.
going to, if you can't actually force turnovers with the extra opportunities, it doesn't matter. Same goes for doing the reverse on offense. I think you look at Tyquan Thornton and Pierre Strong on offense, get 2 guys who are fastest at their positions in the combine.
Yep.
Giving you that home run ability. I think Strong is a guy, especially next year, who can develop into that.
I think so too. Yeah.
And then Jack Jones on defense. I said it before. I think he can be a pick machine. He can be a kind of Marcus Peters. He might get burned every once in a while, but he'll force turnovers, and that's going to make up the difference. I think we saw a little bit of that from Shaun Wade at points too in the preseason. He was looking to jump routes. He was looking to make plays, and if you can get some of those young guys to do that, it feels like we have a whole lot of C+ or B- level players on this team, and you just need a handful of guys to hit B+ or A, like a couple of honor roll students on this team.
Right. Yeah. No, I think
Duggar and Barmore, I think, are the guys too that we're looking at this year who take another leap.
Take that leap.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with you on that. And that's really where it comes. That's what it comes down to, right? Is you need those guys, but you have to have that kind of elite athleticism. Dark Blue Gold makes a great point about, moving away from the old guard. The Patriots were, the guys that said, yeah, we don't need those elite athletes. We can beat you with our brains, right? We're smarter than you. We can get to that spot. Even though you can get there faster, we are good enough to get there, right?
Yeah.
But for me, that's not happening anymore. The guys now are too fast. The league is so much about speed that you have to increase your speed, right? And I think what this comes back to is 2020, right? Where Belichick looked at it and said, yeah, okay, the league's getting super fast, but I'm gonna combat that by getting big. And I'm gonna, draft 2 tight ends, and I'm gonna try to bully you with my quarterback. And I'm gonna go out there and pound you, and that's how we're gonna win. And it didn't work. Now, once they went 7-9, but for the most part, it didn't work, right? And so now he looked at it and said, "Crap, no, that didn't work." Okay, so now we got to get speed. We got to get faster, right? And so you start seeing some of that stuff come from them. And I think Barmore is a great example of, like, he's not super fast, but he's a dominant player from the inside. To have that pass rush from the inside is something they've been missing a lot. And what that does when the pocket collapses is doesn't allow those running quarterbacks to get out of the pocket, right? Because they have pressure in their face, so they have to do something with it. So I think that we're heading in the right direction.
I think I watched a lot of how the starting defense had looked in the preseason. There's a whole lot of plays where it's Judon, it's Wise, it's Jennings. They can get push around the edge, but they're not Von Miller. They're not gonna chop an offensive lineman's arms and get a free rush. They're gonna have to push guys and make that pocket smaller. And you need the defensive tackles to get pushed to really make things uncomfortable for the quarterback. Because you can go around the quarterback all you want. If he has room to step up, I mean, how many years did we watch Tom Brady do that?
Right.
It doesn't matter how fast your edge rusher is if you're making him run around the quarterback.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
That's a lesson for Josh Uche, too, who, by the way, is another one of these freak athletes they've brought in. Hasn't worked out as much. And Jonathan Jones, who's a veteran now, he was a freak athlete coming out of Auburn, too. So that's something to keep in mind. He and Devin McCourty back there, and Kyle Duggar is a great athlete. Cole Strange is a great athlete. They've been slowly rebuilding this, and I think they just got to make sure the mental part's on the same side now, and this team can be really good.
Yep, 100%. And we'll kind of see where that goes. But I do think the future is fairly bright for the Patriots. I really do. Again, they're not winning the Super Bowl this year, right? But I do think that this roster is good enough to get 10 wins. 9 to 10 wins. I really do believe that. So, and I do want to talk about just super briefly some of the guys that the Patriots cut. But one guy I want to talk about in particular is Alex Leatherwood, obviously cut by the Raiders.
Yeah.
Gets drafted at 17th overall, 2 picks behind Mac Jones. I think it's worth a shot, but here's the problem with him. His movement skills aren't great. If he gets on you, it's over, right? He's big and strong, but I don't know if he's as good. I like the idea of bringing someone like him in, but I don't know if he's going to be a good fit in this particular offense that they're trying to run.
Well, they just got a good look at him.
They sure did.
Up close, and I don't know if Josh McDaniels is the one cutting him. Odds are, thanks, Matt. Team, that was a nice little comment. Leather wouldn't. If McDaniels is moving on from him, he's probably not a fit in New England if I had to guess, especially because they're still on the hook for a little bit of money as part of that too.
Yeah, I would agree.
Unless he gets picked up by somebody, correct? If he gets claimed on waivers, they absorb the contract.
Exactly. If they get claimed on waivers, they take his contract on. If he clears waivers, they can sign him to a new free agent contract.
Yeah, so, which there's no way he's getting claimed on waivers just because of the contract part.
Yeah, I would agree. Unless someone loves him and says, we don't even want to take a chance on it, we got to bring him in as a guard. I think that's silly, but someone might do that thinking it's still a rookie contract. He's fairly cheap. He's not super cheap, but he's fairly cheap for the next 3 years. But we'll see.
Yeah. And he had some truly, obviously PFF is hit or miss, but he had some truly horrendous grades last year. I saw he had 2 pass rush or pass blocking grades in the single digits last year, including just a flat 0.
Yeah, which is like almost impossible to do.
Yeah, which is like that's at the point where I would just genuinely rather have James Ferentz if you're going to go out there and play like that.
I agree, 100%. So a few guys that I'd like to see on the practice squad, and I'm sure we can mention them, and then we'll wrap up here. But Kevin Harris for sure, right? 100%. Lil Jordan Humphrey, if he makes it on there. Cam McGrone.
Can I make a note here on Lil Jordan Humphrey? I think there's 2 parts here. One, I think it was interesting. Nick Caley, the tight ends coach, mentioned that Humphrey had not been practicing with the tight ends as of late. And I go with that. His performance against the Raiders, in particular as a blocker, was not great. Pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is the guy where they feel like they already got the best out of him. And he might be a practice squad guy. It wouldn't shock me, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they're like, all right, we got what we wanted out of him and on to the next guy.
Yeah, it's true. It is very true. So Trey Nixon, obviously. Bill Murray. I thought Farms and Ray, both are guys that I think I'd like an extended look at, certainly in the practice squad, and see what happens next year.
Ray more so than Farms, but would obviously welcome both.
Yeah. Yep. And then, Cody Russi for sure, right? Matt Sokol, I think is a guy that again, we talked about it, could end up back on this 53-man roster once they make some maneuvers for IR.
Yeah. And I liked what I saw from him at points in the preseason. So if he's not, a practice squad for him, I think is probably the ideal spot.
Yeah, I agree. And Weidemeyer is another guy that has some potential. I didn't see much from him, but it's kind of tough. He's comes in the middle of camp. They didn't have the full camp with the Patriots. So if they like what they see athletically from him, he's a guy that you could see kind of an extended look at as well.
Might stash him on the practice squad, and you're not going to hear his name again until next season if they keep him around and they like what they saw.
Right, exactly. So, and then as you mentioned already, is Daniel Ukwale suspended 2 games, right? So he will not be active until game 3, and then they're going to have to decide what they want to do with him, whether they want to keep him and cut someone else, or whether they want to cut him.
That should be the Monday after the game in Pittsburgh, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, and I think that works out great for him because if a guy gets hurt, if a guy goes down, if someone isn't playing well, then he could now sneak in, and he's another guy that has shown flashes of ability to get after the quarterback from inside. So,
when they were in pass rush situations, the starting group on the defensive line was Judon and Uche on the edges and Barmore and Equale on the inside. And it worked well. He does well with stunts and twists. He's nimble. So he allows you to do a lot of stuff. I'm not going to be surprised at all if they want to keep him around.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. So we'll see. JJ Taylor's another guy that maybe But I feel like JJ has run his course. I really do. And maybe they bring him back after they drop Ty Montgomery. But like he looks he gets the Bam Childress Award, right? Because he looks awesome in the preseason. And then he gets to the regular season and he's just another guy. Right. And so like, that's the issue that I kind of have with him is that like some of that stuff isn't real. I don't think, at least,
And it's the issue with Taylor too. You'd want him to be your third down back, but he's so small he can't pass block.
Can't block, right?
So you really can't put him out there in the situation where you'd want him.
Yep.
I actually like him a lot as a between the tackle runner. He's so low to the ground and he's able to find rushing lanes really well. I think he worked on a lot of the power run stuff they did, and he's quick. So once he cuts through that hole, he can really get going. But
yeah, no,
we'll
see.
I think he's a fringe guy. He'll find a place somewhere in the league. He'll probably, if he's not with the Patriots this year, he'll land somewhere else and be in a training camp next year, and probably a couple training camps for a couple years after that too.
Yep, I agree. I agree with you 100%. So I think Uquale was Uquale. Was it PEDs that he got popped for? I forget what he suspended for. To be honest
as
with
far as I haven't seen anything on this.
It might be personal conduct type of thing. I'm not 100% sure, but anyways, it doesn't really matter. But I don't think he was suspended at the end of last year. I think it was just 2 games this year, right?
Yeah, it was 2 games this year. It came out in June.
Yeah, so if I had to guess,
still not a. We still don't know what it was for.
Yeah, it was probably some sort of personal conduct thing that they haven't, and they don't really have to tell you what it was. They just say it was personal conduct and go from there. So
yeah,
yes, and Matt did survive his air travel, which is good news.
Should I? Do you want to hear the story real quick?
Very briefly.
I'll keep it quick. I was visiting family in Georgia and had a flight back to New York through Baltimore. Landed in Baltimore last night. Flight got delayed a couple times, and as I'm sitting in the terminal, I just get a text that says, "You've been rebooked on a flight tomorrow at 7:00, and 7:00 in the evening." And yeah, apparently there was some issue with weather and an air traffic control curfew in New York, so ended up having to stay overnight in Baltimore. Was able to at like 2 a.m. call Southwest and get an earlier flight out because there was 1 seat on an earlier direct flight.
There you go.
And I left Georgia at 5:00 yesterday. That's when I left for the airport. Came back into my apartment at 5:00 today. It was a bumpy ride in from Baltimore to New York too, but I'm finally home.
Love it.
Quite a 24 hours with this and all the roster cuts.
Traveling's the worst. And like when you're traveling and then there's other stuff going on and you're like trying to do everything at once and it's like super frustrating, and that's rough.
Yeah, I think I have about 6 or 7 emails I've gotten right now that I have to respond to at some point, and I saw them come through. I can't do this right now.
Yeah, no, not right this second. Plus, I mean, we got to deal with Patriot stuff too. So.
Priorities.
So, but that's it. That's it, guys. Listen, we're going to be back Thursday night. This Thursday night, we're going to be back with a fantasy football draft special. Eat Sleep Fantasy is going to be back again. We're going to be going through a mock draft like we always do to give you all the fantasy football tips and talk all the fantasy guys that you need. It's going to be a great show. So make sure you're back here on Thursday night. That'll be out Friday morning, as it always is. Okay? Thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you.